Harvest time in the wine country, and in vineyards across Sonoma County, thousands of day laborers rise in the pre-dawn hours, for low pay and long hours, to pick a crop that has been essential to the area economy, both in terms of wine production and tourism. But this year, people who help provide those laborers to Sonoma County farms and vineyards are seeing a change.
Yeah, some of the conversations I've had with people in the agricultural industry that have shared that they're really hurting for labor, they're hurting for workers. They're asking, where have all the farm workers gone?
Part of the reason for the change has been attributed to the upward mobility of some immigrants, who after years of toiling in the fields have moved on to higher paying jobs. But many believe something else is at play, something that started with a campaign announcement.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. They're not sending you. They're not sending you. They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. But I speak to border guards, and they tell us what we're getting.
There was DACA and DAPA. There was very clear signs that there was also an effort to try to improve the lives of people, despite this large mechanism that was also deporting people. But that changed with Trump, where there weren't any more unclear signals. It was the rhetoric that Mexicans were rapists and drug dealers, and that we needed to build a wall. It was no longer ambiguous in terms of immigrants feeling not only unwanted, but feeling as if now seemingly the entire federal government, state, local, people were against and wanted to see immigrants gone.
Yeah, well, I think like many people, I thought that he was a joke. I thought that he was a racist and that he had no political future in the United States. And of course, he has been proved wrong in so many ways that Mexico is sending their worst people to the United States. The people who come here are coming in search of opportunities, and they are following their dreams. Sometimes older immigrants have to work really hard, have to work the jobs that no one else wants to work, but their kids are going to school, their kids are going to college and pursuing careers that contribute to this country.
This is something that has actually been occurring to immigrants for many, many decades in the United States. Specifically in the 80s and 90s in California, immigrants were vilified and scapegoated tremendously. But I think today, with the election of President Trump, things are very, very different. I think it's in your face, and those who feel affected are scared, they're marginalized, and they're going in the shadows. And that's something that really, really worries me.
Malpica is an expert on immigration issues who has researched the topic for decades. He says much of the political rhetoric on undocumented immigrants is steeped in stereotypes that have no basis in reality.
So, for example, this idea that immigrants are taking jobs from working class Americans, the data is quite convincing that that's not the case. I've worked on a number of projects where the main goal of the research is to try to understand if immigrants who are undocumented and low skilled, are they basically, taking jobs away from native born individuals? And the research tells us that that's not the case. In many occasions, it's the immigrants that end up applying for these jobs, and local native born Californians do not want to clean toilets. They do not want to go and work at the back of the house of restaurants. They do not want to make beds in our fine 4-star, 5-star hotels, because these are low paid and very exploitative types of jobs.
And there's no denying immigrants, both documented and undocumented, play a big role in California's economic picture. According to estimates by the Center for Migration Studies, the state is home to more than 2 million undocumented workers. The county of Sonoma estimates its share of that total is approximately 20,000 people. Many of them help make Sonoma County wines competitive in the worldwide market.
As we're sipping our fine Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon, who actually picked all these, grapes for us. I could tell you this, I've interviewed many employers, and over they tell me and other researchers that they could not compete at an international market with other wines if it would not be for the immigrant labor force in Sonoma County.
People psychologically, they want to find the blame for whatever is going on, and right now in the year 2017 and with this administration, the blame is placed to immigrants, and they don't get the credit that really immigrants receive. And instead of being fearful, we need to be grateful and honor them. Really, we benefit from that. Everybody benefits. Citizens like ourselves. Businesses, corporations, so they contribute to capitalism. And so we need to be very grateful and recognize their work.
But gratitude seems to be in short supply. In fact, the politically charged atmosphere has led to instances of outright hostility, not just toward undocumented workers, but even U.S. citizens of Hispanic descent.
We received reports of of immigrants who were experiencing hate in the community by those that felt emboldened by this election, being called illegals and wetbacks, and just very, very nasty vitriol that, again, wasn't new, but there was a noticeable escalation in terms of the type of incidents that were happening. So it was very much immediate for immigrants, both in terms of their employment and really what had felt like a very much welcoming community here in Sonoma County. There were some people who were now speaking out against very much our neighbors and coworkers and immigrants who have been part of this community for many, many years now.
I'm very, very worried about how immigrants are feeling in schools, for example, from kindergarten all the way to the college level. Here at Sonoma State, I am very, very preoccupied. Students are afraid. And what's fascinating about this is not only undocumented students become fearful, but even those who are immigrants but who are documented also become fearful. Not only are they fearful for their own circumstance, but also for their immediate loved ones who might in fact be undocumented.
Immigrants are welcome here! Stay clear! Immigrants are welcome here! Stay clear! Immigrants are welcome here! Stay clear!
This was the scene on the campus of Sonoma State University one day after President Trump announced his decision to end the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, or DACA. DACA was enacted during the Obama administration in 2012 to allow individuals who had been brought to the U.S. illegally as minors to receive a renewable 2-year period of deferred action from deportation. The decision to end DACA has created more confusion, anger, and fear.
It definitely seems to be when there's big announcements such as the executive orders or the election or the rescinding of DACA, that people seem to come out and ask questions, but then after a while, out of fear, go back and contact us in other ways that are a little bit more remote.
What if one day, I'm taken away, my parents are taken away, what, then what? This is all we know. This is our home. So people just don't want that, this to be our home. And sometimes you feel like you just want to, you don't know what to do, either to succumb to their demands or fight back. And that's exactly what we're doing today.
As DACA supporters marched through campus, it was not only a march against this fear, but also a call to action.
I think about changing the hearts of people when it comes to immigration. I think that not a lot of people know an undocumented immigrant, and that I think that is changing because a lot of undocumented immigrants are coming out and are telling their story and are trying to meet people who perhaps have a different perception of who we are and what we represent and what we do. I think that's one of the reasons why I have been so vocal about my immigration status, because I want people to know me. I want people to be able to put a face on the story that can sometimes be so abstract. And I think when you meet someone, when you get to know their story, when you get to know them as a person, you're able to see past the label that the government is putting on us and see the person.
The executive order on January 25th of 2017 said any person even accused of a crime, regardless if the matter was not filed or was filed, who is removable is a priority for the federal government. When September 5th came, I had to understand, wait a minute, now that includes DACA recipients. So if a person has had a driving without a license, but has DACA, and now DACA is going to expire, does that now make them a removable priority?
And the fear of families being torn apart is very real. According to the Migration Policy Institute, more than 5 million children in the U.S. have an undocumented parent. A Pew Research Center study estimates that more than 12% of California's K-12 school children have at least one undocumented parent.
And I think there's two ways of sort of approaching this. Or we accept this group and we really bring them in and make them the sort of center of our communities, or we sort of separate them, marginalize them, and they live in this sort of invisible circumstance. And I really wish that all of us will really pick the first one, that they are the bedrock, that they're influential and very, very important as a community.
Even if DACA is reinstated, recipients, also referred to as dreamers, say they have very mixed feelings about how the discussion is being framed in the media and elsewhere, with the approximately 800,000 dreamers being portrayed as good immigrants, somehow separate from the remainder of the 11 million undocumented immigrants.
There's a slippery slope there that you can accuse the parents of being the ones that committed the crime and say that their kids are okay. But if you ask DACA recipients, that's not the case. That's not the case at all. The whole family came here in search of opportunities.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit unfortunate. I actually would like to see an immigration reform. I think we should try to solve this issue of undocumented migration by legalizing a big number of those folks who are already here as undocumented, including the DACA students. But I think it should not only be the DACA students. We're talking around 800,000, let's say 1 million of these individuals. But what happens to their siblings? What happens to their parents? What happens to their grandparents?
It's not an economic, issue. It's not a political issue. It's a human rights issue. So it's definitely something that should, like I said, should be done. Again, DACA was not, something that defines me. It was just basically, like a stopgap, for this, for something bigger to happen, and it's here now.
You can't have a discussion about undocumented immigrants without examining the complex issue of immigration law. Some opponents of immigration reform say undocumented workers know they are breaking the law and need to go through the existing legal channels if they want to stay in the United States. Experts on immigration and those who have personally experienced the process say that option is unrealistic for many, desperately trying to earn money for their families.
Becoming a U.S. citizen, first you need to become a permanent legal resident. It's extremely, extremely difficult. And it could take 10 years, 12 years to actually be processed. I know individuals that want to come to the United States, they want to legalize their status, and it's one barrier after another. They actually believe at one point or another that their paperwork has been lost because they have not received any word from the U.S. government. And they go to these offices of the immigration Custom and Services, and they tell them, no, you're in process, but there's a long queue, and it's going to take many, many years. So you just got to wait patiently. And I think this is another big myth that people have, that the idea is that everybody should come here and legalize their status. It's not that easy. And in addition, it is very, very expensive.
And they say get in the back of the line, but there really is no line, and that's why I think that the immigration system is broken, because there is no way for people who are already here and who have been here for so long to apply for residency or for citizenship. And that's what so many activists have been fighting for there to be a system, for there to be a way in which they could do so.
Another popular talking point, especially during last year's presidential election cycle, is that undocumented immigrants create a higher risk of violent crime in our country. But do the numbers actually back up that assertion?
There's a lot of conversations and a lot of discussions that because we're supposedly inundated by crime, by Latinos who are undocumented, crime has gotten up. And the research tells us the complete opposite. So Ralph Sampson is a scholar at Harvard University who has been monitoring this for the last 10 years or so. And his findings indicate this, that those communities that have quite a bit of immigrants in their communities, high levels of immigrant population, crime has in fact gone down significantly.
In fact, research seems to consistently support this. A 2015 study by the National Academy of Sciences, which is largely funded by the federal government, found that immigrants are much less likely to commit crime than natives. In fact, the same study indicated the presence of large numbers of immigrants seems to lower crime rates. The libertarian Cato Institute came up with similar results in a 2017 study. It found undocumented immigrants were 44% less likely to be incarcerated than natives, and documented immigrants were 69% less likely to be incarcerated. Ironically, undocumented immigrants can actually be more vulnerable to crime.
And that's something that really, really worries me. So, for example, what happens if individuals who are undocumented need to have access to the police department, for example? What will happen there? Will they not call the police department just by the fact that they're undocumented? So this victimization of immigrants is very, very heightened.
But it's also an impact on the well-being of our county overall. If people are not going to the doctor because they're afraid, well, then other people are going to get sick. If people are afraid to report a crime because someone might be removed from the country, then other people are at risk.
Bernice Espinosa is the criminal immigration specialist for the Sonoma County Public Defender's Office. The Board of Supervisors funded her position 2 years ago to advise both green card holders and undocumented immigrants of the collateral consequences of being arrested and help guide them through a complex legal system.
This is our penal code. There's a lot of things in here. We actually sometimes write some of the codes. We found out that allowing your wife into a brothel is a crime. I mean, the things that are become part of the criminal code, some of them are really minor. And when we have rhetoric like dreamers, not criminals, that's problematic because those people are not necessarily mutually exclusive. And so many things become criminalized in our society.
By providing immigrants with legal advice and help, the Public Defender's Office has not only been able to head off deportations that would have split up families, but Espinosa argues it is standing for fundamental American values.
When my office in particular interacts with a person, it's in the most vulnerable time of their lives. Being arrested and going through the criminal process is scary. And especially in a time like now. And so it's definitely been the commitment of my public defender, Kathleen Posey, to make sure that the people know that we are here and we're here to serve. And we're here to make sure that everyone, regardless of what their immigration status is, can get the resources of the public defender if they're indigent and need our assistance.
The face of Sonoma County is changing. The Hispanic population has grown dramatically, and its impact on our economy goes well beyond providing a workforce for low-skilled jobs. According to the Sonoma County Economic Development Board, there are about 4,000 Hispanic-owned businesses in Sonoma County, a number expected to grow. So how can immigration issues be addressed in a way that is intelligent and compassionate? One way to start is conversation. The group Aliancia for Equity is made up of educators, staff, and students at Sonoma State University. The group meets regularly to discuss ways to promote more ethnic diversity among faculty and more opportunities for minority students. While the group is concerned by both the rhetoric and action coming out of Washington, they also view the current political climate as an opportunity to promote more dialogue and awareness.
If you just looking a little bit, and you drive around Sonoma County or around, Fresno, you see the farm workers who are doing the job that nobody wants to do, and they are sacrificing their lives, their bodies, to feed us, to provide services for us. So that fear is not grounded in reality. So for me, it's being so grateful every day, every time we eat, every time we access any service, even at Sonoma State, every time we come to classes, we need to be so grateful for the job that they contribute to sustain the greatness and the success of California and in the United States.
But real change and real solutions may only come from breaking down cultural barriers and giving a voice to a population that often lives in the shadows. Many of those we interviewed say that work begins in our own Sonoma County communities.
So what I'm noticing right now that regardless of race and ethnicity or immigration status, there is the majority of people who were good people ready to do something, but because things were not that terrible outside, it seems that they were waiting somehow, more skills, more time, more ideas, and now they realize that this is the time. So I see a good energy, for example, among my students, undergraduate students, to start infusing change.
It's very narrow-minded when we play on the fears of people, of somehow strangers coming into our communities that maybe look different, sound different, speak a little differently. That's the kind of rhetoric that is divisive. That's the kind of rhetoric that plays on the worst of us. But we have to just stop and think about what is the most human part of what is happening here, and that's people just trying to better themselves and their families, and that these opportunities are not finite, and that these opportunities, if we are generous and caring and give opportunities to others, that oftentimes that pays dividends for all of us down the road.
Talk to people who are undocumented and don't try to pity them, don't try to act like they need your compassion, but try to listen to their stories and try to add the human component to the situation that I think is sometimes taken out of the story. I think that's very important, and I think that's the way to move forward.
I'm the eternal optimist. This is the reason why I actually love this kind of research. So I see a lot of remarkable allies. I'm very proud to actually call Sonoma County my home. I have many friends who are middle-class whites and do not second and are not in the same sort of, ideas of a lot of the people like the President of the United States. They view immigrants in a very completely different light. And I think what all of us should do is really trying to be inclusive, of trying to go out of our way to make these communities feel at home, for all of us to feel uncomfortable and stretch out a hand and befriend, work, socialize, play with people who are very different from us. And I think the more we do that, I think we'll be better as a community and better as human beings. We want all our children to feel that they interact, socialize with people who are different from them, because they could actually become even better individuals.